I'm glad you're here with us for this weekend devotional at the Dora Church of Christ. I said I was going to look at this idea of service, but rather than that, because it interferes too much with my lesson Sunday, I began to sit here in my office today and listen. I have a very a well-known idea or thought of the wind. Back in my office sets the water tower and the cables and all of these things. And when the wind blows, as it is today, you hear those things. You watch that water tower rock back and forth. And as I began to think about that idea, this idea we serve the Lord, and we shouldn't worry about all the other things. Serve God. But so often we become worried about all of the other things. We look at the storms that occur within this life in itself. We see all of these things happening and the difficulties that come about. And there's always something that is shaken, maybe completely moved because of the turmoils, the storms of life. I was reading, or I come across, I've read the verse before, but in Psalms 107, I want us to listen. I'm not at the moment, I can't tell you what this is about, but it relays a story. Starting in verse 23, he said, Some went down to the sea in ships, doing business on the great waters. They saw the deeds of the Lord, his wondrous works in the deep, for he commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven. They went down to the depths. Their courage melted away in their evil plights. They reeled and staggered like drunken men. They were at their wits' end. Does that not describe the storms of life? And then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. Then they were glad that the waters were quiet, and they brought them to their desired haven. Let them be thankful in the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man. Let them extol him in the congregation of the people, and praise him in the assembly of the elders. In Matthew, or in Mark, the 4th chapter, we come and we find the disciples of Christ have been set out on, I want to say Galilee. They've been set out on a boat to cross to the other side. And as they were going across, the wind began to shake, and the boat began to shake. The wind began to carry them and to abuse them. And they were shaken. They were afraid, much as we would be in a storm today, much as we are in the storms of life. Jesus was in the boat. It says in verse 38 of Mark 4, but he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind, and he said to the sea, Peace, be still, and the wind ceased. And there was a great calm, and he said to them, Why are you afraid? Have you no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? You know, I began thinking about this idea, and I've heard this thought. If we have a God that can control the winds of the sea, the waves, then he can control the difficulties, the storms of life. He can help us through them. He can give us the comforts that we need as we face those things. Sometimes it is so difficult for us to look out into this world and to see those things we come to a point where they overwhelm us. They frighten us. This idea of having faith, giving ourselves over to God and saying, I'm going to trust in Him no matter what it is, no matter the difficulty, no matter how horrid it may look. I'm going to look to God. I'm going to have faith in Him. I know that He will help me through these situations. It's difficult sometimes for us to look and to say, I'm going to serve God with all my heart, with all my soul, because of the things that are happening. We forget to look and realize God has control. Go back to Psalms 46 and starting in verse 8. I want us to think about what he says. He says, come behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth, how he makes wars to cease, how he makes wars cease to end of the earth. He breaks the bow, he shatters the spear, he burns the chariots with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. In other words, be silent. Just stop. Just stop. But we have difficulty at this idea. Be still and know. Just stop and know that I'm God. Just put my faith in God and say, I know He's there. I know He cares for me. I know He will see after me. I know He will care for me. You see, if we will look to God, God calms the storms of life. He can set them still. Or at least He gives us a peace within that we see them as undisturbing. It's difficult for us to get a hold of these ideas because we have difficulty putting our faith in God. We're trying to control it ourselves. It can't be controlled by me. I cannot stop life and make it not happen. And so as he finishes, he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. You see, it's to Him we look. It's to Him that we place all of these difficulties on. They belong, or that we're to give them over to Him. Why do we spend our time trying to think that we can handle the situation or that we can control everything that's there? It's impossible for us to control life. We look to God. He will give us peace, knowing that He is in control, knowing that He can put the quiet to all of these things. We may not stop moving. It may not stop blowing. It may not stop moving things around. And yet with God, I can look at it and say it's okay. Be still and know. Stop moving. Look to God and realize that He is God. I hope that you will think about these things over this weekend, through the next week, this next month, that you will take them and that you will try to use that thought in your life that God brings peace. He brings stillness to the storms of life. He may bring them in stillness in my heart, in my mind, just knowing that He's in control and that He will see after us. I want to thank you for being here today, and may God bless.